Welcome. We are back with another conversation today. I have with me some great friends, Joni Leiter and Ryan. Did I say it right? And we're going to talk about what it looks like and how you as a brand or anyone who's listening can conduct a social media audit. So we're going to talk about all things audit. So to kick things off, just feel free to jump in, everyone. What is an audit and how is it different, or how does it compare to a social media strategy? Are they the same thing? How does that work?
I can jump in. It's basically like a preamble to the strategy. We kind of start from the beginning, start from scratch in looking at clients' channels, providing context in their own performance, and also looking at competitor performance. And this is just an opportunity for us to give optimizations and understand if they're able to target their audience properly.
It's a great way to really get an idea of the baselines that we're working with to see, what's really working for a client, what's not working, what is the overall ecosystem of their social activity and their competitors as well to again get those kind of baseline informational nuggets to help inform the development of a strategy. Because in order to get where you're going, you got to take a look at where you've come from.
Profound, right there. That is
that's all profound. You're getting. That's my profound BS for the day.
No, but you make a good point. It's funny. We recently did an audit for a client that was solely an audit, and it was almost harder than a traditional strategy because we're so used to looking at where you've been to determine where you're going to go. And so I do think the two go hand in hand and work almost better when you're able to do both. But when focusing on just the audit part, what are the major areas when you're thinking about looking at where you've been? I guess, Joni, I'll start with you from a content standpoint, and then Ryan, move on to you from an analytics standpoint of what are the major areas that should be looked at in an audit.
So from a content standpoint, we are looking at what's working, what's not working for them, and going channel by channel, looking at engagement rates, looking at what the audience is doing when engaging with these posts, and again, looking at kind of those optimizations that are available and providing those to the clients before we would, dive into a strategy. Kind of looking for those areas of opportunities for the clients.
What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, so a few things that we want to look at with an audit numerically. What is the posting frequency that a brand is utilizing across platforms? How does that compare to the posting frequency of their competitors? Are they posting a similar amount of times a month? Are they way off? And looking at that comparison as just one factor, but also looking at what are they getting with that frequency? Are they posting a lot? Are they posting hundreds of times in a month, but they're only getting a few engagements? That could say they're putting a lot of effort into creating this content, but they're not really getting a lot of return. And looking at competitors, are they also doing the same? Are they posting a lot and not getting much return? Can we learn something about the industry specifically that they're in on this channel? How does that inform the strategy going forward? Could it indicate that maybe they need to just pare down how frequently they're posting and just minimize the amount of effort? Or do they need to reassess the tactics for that content on that platform in order to get the most out of all of that effort that they're putting into it? Also looking at what is the different post type breakdown. How often are they posting video versus photo versus text only? And what's the return on that? What are the engagements that we're getting from that? With owned content too, being able to look at click data is also really important. How effective is content at driving that ultimate objective of getting people to click to a website. And when auditing competitors, it's harder to get to that because click data is not something that's available if you don't own the channel. So having to make some assumptions there as well is all a part of it.
That makes sense. So that reminds me of I'm going to ask you guys a hot take, and I'll set it up really quickly. So the first part of it is when you mentioned kind of looking at it numerically, often we're looking at, the client that we're working with in comparison to competitors. Mm-hmm. And one of the most common phrases is, oh, well, XYZ competitor has all of these followers. So hot take, here we are. Do followers still matter? Ready, go.
Followers matter if you want to brag about how many followers that you have, but so many of the social channels have really implemented these newsfeed algorithms that followers don't matter. It's counterintuitive because you would think, I'm interested in receiving content from this brand or this influencer or what have you. I'm going to hit follow and I'm going to see that content. You're not. You need to engage with it a lot in order to keep it in your feed. But there's so much. If you were to put a real-time feed on something like Facebook, it's just going to be a constant stream. There's just so much. And part of why it's not that is there's so much noise. So Facebook, of course, wants to deal with the amount of noise. Also, they want to make you pay in order to reach your audience. So there are a few factors going into it. But we've been following this for I want to say since about 2014. At one point, Facebook said that you with a post would reach about 16% of your followers. And then they implemented a massive newsfeed algorithm change, and that cut it down to about 2 to 5% if you're lucky. And it's kind of hovered about there. Different platforms have a different percentage follower reach. Instagram, it's a bit higher. LinkedIn, somewhere in the middle. We've done several blog posts tracking it, but overall, I mean, you're lucky if you're reaching 10% of your fans. So if you've got millions of followers, you're not reaching all of them with that message. It's really it pales in comparison. So putting all of your efforts into driving follower growth is going to result in diminished returns. You're better off doing what they want you to do, which is paid placement and making sure that that gives you the control to reach the audience that you want to reach. You can't really control who's out there following you, but you can control who you reach with your message. And ultimately that's what we want to do with social media marketing. But yeah, followers unfortunately don't matter as much as they used to in the early days.
Piggybacking off of Ryan, piggybacking off of Ryan's statement, the followers don't matter unless you're reaching that quality audience. You can reach as many people as you want, but unless you're hitting the quality audience, your exact target audience and who you want to start to bring into your pages, the followers don't mean anything unless you have who you want to be talking to.
That's a good point, because I also saw with a particular client where, and Ryan, I think you and I worked on this client together, where we saw a massive following on one platform, but their organic reach was the same as a smaller following on Instagram, for example, but they were actually reaching the same amount that they were reaching on Facebook that had tens of thousands of followers versus 2,500 followers. But because the engagement and the content that was happening on that platform was resonating with their audience, they were actually reaching the same amount, if not more than this channel that had a massive following.
Yeah. And that's another caveat too, when we're doing a competitor analysis as a part of an audit. We're not able to see how many impressions a post gets on a competitor post because we don't have access to that data. So we have to make some assumptions based on what we see. So if they have a certain number of followers, assuming that maybe 3 to 5% that's your impressions number, but it's really kind of guideline, baseline information to inform that. But yeah, we can look at a competitor and see they have millions of followers and assume that they're not reaching those millions of followers.
That makes sense. So thinking about this audit, you were saying an audit is about comparing where you've been and using it as, like Joni said earlier, as a preamble into what you're going to do. But what are we benchmarking this against? So I know we talk about understanding the target audience and what they're doing. Joni, can you talk a little bit about what we utilize to look at target audiences and why we do that?
Yeah, so we use a tool called GWI, and we input the what the client gives us in saying who their targeted audience is, and we're able to see what the audience is doing on various platforms. Is the audience on the platforms where they're actually working? So we can see if that target audience is on Facebook, Instagram, any channel that we want. We can see what those actions that they're doing are, what engagements they're doing on the platform. We can see what kind of tone that they want to be coming from the brand. We can see what their audience wants from a brand. So we can see, is that client actually following along with what their target audience wants to see? And that kind of helps us then inform some optimizations. And when looking at that content, be able to tell them, hey, we think that, or we're seeing that your content, your audience wants you to be a little bit more educational. We're not seeing a ton of that in this content. We suggest maybe go a little bit more in that educational direction.
That's very interesting. And then Ryan, how do we utilize that information? So there's I think about that target audience information organically, but then there's also the complication, if you will, of paid. So what do you see analytically or just overall as far as how paid influences not only those target audience data information, but also how we would analyze what has been happening from an audit standpoint because of paid?
Yeah, how do we factor in paid as when we're looking at the audit? Mm-hmm. Are we talking owned or are we talking competitor?
Owned.
So with a paid audit, we want to get into a client's ad account and take a look at what targeting they've been utilizing. How does it line up with who they're trying to reach and how successful were those targets? What demographics seem to be more engaged than not? And how does that line up with the intent? And then how does that line up with what we're seeing in terms of the audience research? Is the data supporting it? The performance? Is the data kind of counter to the performance? And what can we learn as we would go into building a strategy and building out a paid recommendation there based on those two inputs and whether or not they align?
That makes sense. And then we've talked a little bit about competitors throughout this. And though we probably, like you said, we don't have access to that data information on the paid side, but we do utilize a tool that shall not be named because, we got to leave a little bit of mystere for those who are watching us. But we have a tool that allows us to pull in some publicly available data on how competitors are performing. And I think you talked about this a little bit earlier when you were talking about the post frequency and the things like that within the competitive set. Are there any other key things that someone should be looking out for when they're comparing themselves against a potential competitor?
I think looking for, we like to look at all up performance in comparison. So across, engagement rates, looking at that follower comparison and how that's jiving with the engagements, what types of engagements are most successful across the different competitors' platforms, but also looking for outliers too. So are we seeing that based on the average performance of, let's say, competitors' Instagram content, there are a lot that have, like 90% have 200, 300 engagements, but then we get to 5 that have tens of thousands. I think we can make an assumption that they're utilizing paid, and to a degree, what frequency. If it's 5 in the course of a month or 5 in the course of a year. So I think that can inform, based on some assumptions that we're seeing in the data and some of those outliers, or it could be an indication of a very successful post too. So there's also that human element of taking a little bit of a deeper look and seeing what was likely the intent with this post, how is this post executed, and using that to inform the overall analysis.
I will say from the content side, if you're looking at your competitors and you're seeing that they're posting a ton or their content is a little bit higher level than what you're making, or it's lower level, you kind of have to think about the resources. What resources do they have at their disposal? Mm-hmm. So do they have a larger team who has more time to dedicate to social media, or is there a smaller team on their end working on something that they are working on their initiative, so they don't have a ton of time to hit what they need to on social? So you kind of have to just think about, in that comparison sense, you know what you have on your team. You don't really know what the other teams are looking like. So it's hard to compare yourself in that sense as well.
This has been really great. So we'll wrap up here, but I do want to leave our watchers or listeners with any closing advice if they're getting ready to embark on a social audit. We'll go around the three of us, but any last bits of closing advice for anyone who's getting ready to start an audit for their brand? We'll start with you, Joni.
Me? That's a lot of pressure. I'm thinking probably you have to be prepared to start from the beginning, and be prepared to and to see things that might surprise you, that you might not want to see. And you have to maybe start to reevaluate all of what you're doing, or you're doing a great job. You can't go in with an exact idea of what you're going to see, because the point of the audit is to pull it all, see what you're doing, what's working, what's not working. And you just got to be prepared for what's kind of coming your way.
I would say go into an audit with 3 to 5 key questions that you want to answer to give your analysis some focus. I think having that in mind will help direct where you go with it. Having a really clear idea of what you want to get out of it specifically.
That actually ties into what I was going to say, which is at the end of an audit, if it's not directly going into a strategy, having some sort of start, stop, keep that kind of recaps the entire audit, and you're able to very quickly identify based on the things we've seen, what are the things we should start, what are the things we should stop doing, and what are the things that are working for us and we should keep doing. Awesome. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you all for taking the time to join me in this conversation. Thank you, everyone who's still here listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye all.